how Malaysia now is formally applying to join BRICS and how is this going to affect the whole world trade. Most of them look at BRICS as an enemy of the West. With such a protectionist kind of mentality, shouldn't you be celebrating or asking yourself, they are improving, shouldn't how we are going to improve, but instead it's like, how are you going to threaten us?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, the podcast that talks about public policies in ways that are relevant to you, the person on the street. Peter, how have you been?
Oh, for me, it's just been busy this week. Almost every day has been a back-to-back meeting for me.
Okay.
It's just handling a lot of his stuff. Yeah, what about yourself? Anything interesting? You're in a nice batik?
Yeah, I've been quite busy. The reason why I'm in a batik today is because firstly, I gave a sort of like a lecture or a presentation to a group of executive MBA students from the Changjiang or Cheong Kong Graduate School of Business. This is based in Beijing, and I think this is part and parcel of a larger trend where I see a lot of executive MBA programs are sending their students to Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, because of the interest in wanting to invest in this region.
Right. Wow. That sounds like a very positive thing, right? Especially when the investment of schools to actually find out more about Southeast Asia means that there's a more longer term interest as well, I suppose.
Yes, and this is something that we'll touch on when we talk about Premier Li Qiang's visit to Malaysia recently.
Before we move on, we just want to take this time to thank Zeus Coffee for sponsoring this episode. So in front of us is the SOE, Single Origin Espresso CEO Latte. Yes, so for those of you who enjoy premium coffee bean with a premium taste, Zeus has it as well. Necessity crafted for the unique. So go and check it out. Order from the Zeus app.
Maybe let me just address one issue that was brought up in the comment section with regards to Saifuddin Abdullah's interview.
Yep.
And many people asked me, why didn't I point blank ask him, why did he jump ship? Why did he leave PKR, jump to Bersatu? Why was he part of the Sheraton move? There are a couple of reasons why I didn't ask that question directly. Firstly, it's because in another podcast, Azmin Ali had already explained some of the reasons why he initiated the Sheraton move and why I think it's likely that many of the people from PKR who jumped ship made that decision. And I'll come back to that. The second reason is also because I felt that it was more important to focus on certain policy issues. Things like equal allocation for MPs, the current state of institutional reform or the lack thereof under this Madani government. But I just want to take this opportunity to draw you guys behind the curtain. And I've not shared this with you before. There's probably a lot of things I can talk about with regards to the Sheraton move. Do you remember there were about 11 PKR MPs who jumped ship together with Azmin, as part and parcel of the Sheraton move, right?
Yes.
So this is not something that I asked Saifuddin, Dato' Saifuddin, directly, either in public or in private. But this is my educated guess on what happened. Basically, what Azmin did was to let his sort of like a loyalist in PKR know that this Sheraton move is going to happen. And the reason is because if and when Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim was going to take over as Prime Minister, if let's say Tun Mahathir decided to step down, it is almost certain that Anwar would not allow Azmin and some of his loyalists to remain in cabinet and in government. Anwar would use his time as Prime Minister to kill them off politically.
Right.
Within PKR. This would have been Azmin's pitch to them. And Azmin would have said, if you don't join me now, then don't expect to remain as ministers or deputies. And at the same time, there were a couple who were not ministers or deputy ministers, including the former MP who had this New Zealand PR status. I'm not sure whether you remember him, the Deputy Tourism Minister, former MP for Segamat. And his pitch to one or two of these guys would be to say, if you join me, I will make sure that you can become at least a deputy minister. Right? So that would have been the pitch. And I think Saifuddin would have made the calculations and say, look, I better side the side that's most likely to win. So he took a gamble and in a sense it paid off because the Sheraton move succeeded. Although I think at one point in time it was 50-50 and he remained as a minister, a full minister. They changed portfolios from foreign ministry to communications and then later he went back to being a foreign minister. And I think that would be the reason why he had to make those adjustments. If you guys notice, go back to the interview. I did sort of like press him a bit in terms
very
of
nicely, not too hard.
Not too harsh. And he did sort of like admit to saying that, sometimes in life you make certain decisions. I think he may have used the word mistake as well. And he said, we have to live with those decisions, right? So I think, whether or not he feels a bit regretful over that episode, I think it's probably water under the bridge. And he has chosen his lot. This time he's in Bersatu. He is part of the leadership there. And I think as long as he wants to remain in politics, active politics, frontline politics, it's likely that he would have to stay in Bersatu and try to contribute in the political arena through his membership of Bersatu and being an MP for Bersatu.
Yeah, you can only jump once, right? Yeah.
Well, actually,
he jump more than once then.
He left UMNO to join PKR. Many people may not know this, but his move into PKR was facilitated and supported by none other than Azmin Ali. And Azmin Ali gave him position in one of the think tanks in PKR, in the Selangor state government, when he was the Menteri Besar.
Right.
So that's another thing that you guys need to realize in politics. You always need to have somebody who is your mentor, your supporter, right? And you sort of like follow the coattails of this particular person. This person rise, then you probably can rise. If let's say the person falls, it's likely that you will probably suffer the same fate. This is the nature of politics.
Talking about mentor and also getting a sack or not as a minister. Your previous SG, right? Guan Ning, Guan Ning recently put it up on the news saying that Tun Mahathir actually threatened to sack him quite a few times.
I think that information, from what I know during that time, probably has some validity to it, because Mahathir also threatened to replace Yeo Bee Yin in cabinet because of her refusal to give a blanket check to liners to continue to operate. Right. Whereas some people had advised Tun Mahathir, and I think probably wrongly advised Tun Mahathir, that this is something that we cannot U-turn on. We have to allow liners to go on to operate because it's an important investment, which is true. But I think Bee Yin did the right thing in terms of wanting to be responsible and wanting to make sure that the environmental sort of like safeguards were put in place, including the permanent disposal facility for the waste. And definitely she received very strong backing from Guan Ning at that time. And I think Guan Ning definitely also defended Tony Phua, who I think was unfairly attacked. And you can refer to our episode interview with Tony as well under this channel. Guan Ning, knowing the person that he is, he definitely who is very loyal to the people who are loyal to him. And he defended Tony, and he probably suffered a lot of negative tongue lashings from Tun Mahathir at that time. I mean, Guan Ning talked about Mahathir having selective memory, highlighting certain things in that particular book that was written by this journalist who was at one point in time quite close to Najib, Roman. So, I actually posted a response as a comment in Guan Ning's Instagram. I said that all of us are guilty of selective memory. Some are more selective than others, right? So I think, I'm also guilty of that. And I hope that, if one day all these stories do come out in a book that I'm hoping to write, I'll be able to be quite honest about all these kinds of things. Right.
That's nice. We look forward to read your book when it's out.
So I think a bit heavier first section than I was anticipating. So maybe just take a short break and then we'll be right back after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast. I am Mr. Botak OKM, and with me I have...
I'm Mr. Money, Peter.
Hey Peter, so Premier Li Qiang came together with his delegation last week to celebrate Malaysia and China's 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations. Before we go into the details of the MOUs that were signed and all that, just from reading the news, looking at some pictures and whatnot, what was your general impression of that visit?
Definitely it was one that gave a lot of hope to Malaysians, right? At least news-wise, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, one thing I did notice is that after that, my YouTube came up with quite a lot of news feed of videos where foreigners actually talked about this visit. It did not just caught Malaysians' attention. It actually caught foreign media attention. That's what I noticed. And they specifically named like how Malaysia now is formally applying to join BRICS.
BRICS, yeah.
And how is this going to affect the whole world trade, everything all. Yeah, so it seems like it's actually quite big news all over the world, not just in Malaysia.
So the kind of media and also foreign kind of coverage and clips that were pushed to you through YouTube, what was the tone of those messages? Was it overwhelmingly positive? Was it quite balanced?
Most of them look at BRICS as an enemy of the West. Okay. There's that very underlying tone there that generally all these BRICS countries are the
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe a not so balanced kind of response lah.
Yes, which
in
I
terms
find
of some of the foreign media.
which I find it rather weird, and I don't quite like it also, because even when you talk about semiconductor improvement, recently I was reading a lot about the science advancement in China, right? It's been a huge topic in economists, right?
Yep.
So even the tone of it generally is, by China advancing so much in science, will it threaten the Western country? And I'm thinking to myself, it's such a protectionist kind of mentality.
Yep.
Like, shouldn't you be celebrating or asking yourself, they are improving? Shouldn't how we are going to improve? But instead, it's like, how are you going to threaten us?
I would say at the end of the day, what we need to do is to make sure that Malaysian interests are protected. Whether we join BRICS, whether we join OECD, and we need to know what is the largest strategic interest of Malaysia joining these groupings. Going back to Li Qiang, just to give you a bit of a summary, in terms of the MOUs that were witnessed, there were 14 G2G or government-to-government MOUs involving different ministries. MITI, I think, signed 3 MOUs with the Minister of Commerce from China. There were MOUs signed and that was witnessed by Li Qiang with the Ministry of Agriculture. The second Finance Minister was there as well. Ministry of Communications, the Deputy Minister was there. Ministry of Housing and Local Government, Ministry of Tourism. There were a number of government-to-business MOUs that were witnessed by the MITI Minister. So there are 2 levels. One is the G2G part, that was witnessed by Premier Li Qiang, Prime Minister Anwar, together with the respective minister from Malaysia and their counterpart from China. So I think there were 1 or 2 ministers or vice ministers from China that were there. And then the other MOUs were witnessed by the Chinese ambassador to Malaysia. So that's the G2G part. Because I was involved in the discussions of one of the MOUs that involve a Chinese bank. So for that part, where MITI, for example, witnessed the MOUs with 3 Chinese banks, that one was only witnessed by the MITI minister. Right? And the reason why this is the case, again, drawing you guys behind the curtain, right, is because the Chinese government wants to make sure that the premier is only used or there to witness government-to-government related MOUs.
Right.
They don't want to mix up anything to do with the private sector, even though the Chinese banks and all that, they're actually owned by the Chinese government ultimately.
So they can't split these 2 events. The business side is the business events, then the government side is the government events like that.
Yeah, so for the G2G MOUs, those were signed, I think, on the second day. Right? And then the G2B MOUs, that was only witnessed by the MITI minister. So they separate the 2 events quite distinctly. One is G2G and then the other one is more to do with the business community.
Right.
For me, the G2G MOUs were important, but I think it's more important to see how this will result in actual deliverables. So I think finally we managed to get the approval to export our whole fruit durian to China. Before this MOU, even now, I'm not sure whether it's been executed, we can only send durians that cut or package or frozen, right?
Yeah.
So now with this alternative and additional channel, it means that our durian producers would have better access into the Chinese market.
That's right.
It's a good thing.
Do you have any insights on what are some of the most exciting MOUs that were being signed?
So in my capacity as MIDA director, I met the leaders and the management people from this investment bank in China called China International Capital Corporation. They've not really been that active in Southeast Asia, but because of these geopolitical and geoeconomic pressures, they see a lot of Chinese companies coming out into Southeast Asia. And that's when they decided to also set up shop in the region. Of course, their regional HQ is in Singapore, but they are also coming into Malaysia to have different activities. So, for example, they recently had a online investor conference that was organized together with Bursa and also Maybank Investment. They invited me as one of the speakers. We are trying to pitch Malaysia as a good equity investment destination, having a diversified economy. So I could see that for CICC, this is an investment bank that could allow MIDA, could allow MITI to access many of the important decision makers in the state-owned enterprises that were focusing on different sectors of the economy, including renewable energy, AI, automotive. And I encourage MIDA to explore signing an MOU with CICC. Right? And, I got the buy-in from people in MITI. I spoke a little bit about this to the minister, Tengku Zafrul, and he and his team were very, very good in terms of facilitating this engagement. And the MIDA team also worked very hard on this. So I played one small role, but the MIDA and the MITI officers together with CICC, they are the ones who did a lot of the heavy lifting. And it's public information. This MOU was signed.
Do you foresee that the China capital market will pour into Malaysia's startup ecosystem?
One of the sort of like investors or funds that were present at KL20, it's called Hopu ARM. The founder was there as well at KL20. CICC facilitated a meeting between Hopu ARM and also the MITI Minister Tengku Zafrul. Again, this public information. You can check Tengku Zafrul's Instagram page on this. And these are the kind of high-level engagements that we want to have to bring to Malaysia to invest in, for example, the semiconductor sector. It can be in IC design, it can be advanced packaging. So this is just the start. I'm sure that with better coordination and facilitation, we'll be able to get hopefully more Chinese capital to invest not just in the equity market, not just in FDI, but also in the startup, the PE, the VC ecosystem in strategic areas.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe on this note, I'd like to ask your opinion, right? A lot of these kinds of events, right, are also about optics. So of course, I think PMX together with Premier Li Qiang, that made not just national, but also, like you said, international news, right? But in terms of the ministers that were involved in this visit, from your perspective, which ministers do you think were sort of like gain a little bit more as a result of this?
That's a very good question. Actually, I don't really see anyone except PMX.
Okay.
In my opinion, like maybe I didn't read enough yet.
So I think that is the right take to have, because definitely the Prime Minister would be front and center of these kinds of engagements, and he should be. Right, so credit to PMX for getting the optics right. But the other person that I think also captured a bit of the headlines was the person who greeted Li Qiang when he came down from the airplane, and also sent him off when he left. Right. So do you remember who that person was?
No.
Okay. So usually for these kinds of high-level delegations, right, when it's somebody who's at the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister level, right, you would send a member of government, either a minister or deputy minister, to be the chaperone for this person.
Yep.
Right. So it can mean sitting in the car with this person, this leader. Probably wouldn't have been the case for Premier Li Qiang, but it also mean greeting the person, the first person that greets him and welcomes him to Malaysia, and then sends him off. So for example, when President Obama came, do you know who was the minister at that time who was given the responsibility of greeting him? Can you remember?
No.
It was Khairi Jamaluddin.
Oh.
Yeah, so he said, "Welcome to Malaysia." President Obama. That kind, and he would have the ability to have some kind of small talk, introduce him to some people, who were receiving part of the receiving delegation.
Right. So this is a very important position, but in our eyes, it's like we kind of like forget about it. But if you're building a political career, it will be extremely important.
And you will know that these are the photos that the journalists locally and internationally would be taking as Premier Li Qiang comes and he departs.
Wow. So this time around, who's the person?
None other than the Minister of Transport, Anthony Loke.
I see.
Yeah. So I think Anthony also gained quite a lot of brownie points. Definitely got a lot of media coverage. I think the Chinese press would have covered that quite a bit.
Man.
I think Anthony also came up with very practical follow-up and suggestion after opening of the soft launch of the ECRL station at Gombak, which is one of the things, one of the events that Premier Li Qiang was at, because this is probably the most important and the most expensive Belt and Road Initiative project in Malaysia, the East Coast Rail Line that links Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang, all the way to Selangor.
That's right.
Something that Anthony mentioned, which I think made quite a lot of sense, is, he said that this should be part and parcel of a rail connectivity that goes through Thailand and then goes up to China. So if we can bring more traffic along this railway line, then it will also increase the chances of the ECRL being something that's financially sustainable. So I think this one definitely is a good suggestion to make and would have, I think, scored Anthony a lot of points among the people who are observing this visit.
How do they actually end up selecting the person who goes to greet this important premier who's coming, right? Or minister is coming?
So for these kinds of important visits, there's usually some lobbying and discussion lah. Right. So I think Anthony has made it quite clear that, as a party and as a country, we should make sure our ties with China are very firm and very solid. And it's something that I think PMX also buys into. And given the fact that, he is our most senior Chinese leader in government, Chinese meaning ethnically Chinese, it will also make sense for him to greet Premier Li Qiang and be able to converse with him in Mandarin without having an interpreter there. Right. So that kind of lobbying discussion makes sense. And I think for Kyrie, he definitely would have lobbied for it. And I think probably may have thought that, okay, he would be a better person to greet Obama compared to, let's say, the foreign minister. Whom I think most people would have forgotten who was it by that time. If I'm not mistaken, it should have been Anifa Aman from Sabah at that time. Right. So, this is part and parcel of the lobbying. Maybe just one last point on this. Not a very big kind of visit, but when I was deputy minister, I was sort of like the chaperone for the visit of the then, and even now, he's still in that position, the deputy prime minister of New Zealand. Right, many people still remember Jacinta Ardern. I don't think she visited Malaysia when she was prime minister, but when Winston Peters, the then deputy prime minister, and he's still deputy prime minister now under a new government, he visited. I was given the responsibility of sort of like hosting him, so to speak. So I followed him to different events, try to explain the current lay of the land with regards to the new government at that point in time. So I didn't have a choice. I definitely didn't lobby for it, but I was given that responsibility, and that was assigned by Wisma Putra.
Right, I see. Very interesting.
Yeah. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into some of the behind the scenes operations for these kinds of high level visits, and we'll be right back after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the third segment of the Are We OK podcast. This week is also the week of the opening of the new parliamentary session.
That's right.
And I mean, any things which any of the headlines that caught your attention?
I think maybe I'll walk out.
Hey, what, you want to walk out? You don't like parliament? You don't like parliament, is it? Or you don't like the MPs? Or
I think one of the interesting things about parliament is that this time around, at the moment it starts, is one of those exciting period where second session straight away got walk out, right? Yeah, very interesting.
Why did they walk out? Do you remember?
As I'm trying to piece together the information, the whole idea is when they referred one Saiful, to become the Parliamentary Select Committee on Privileges.
Yeah, to refer him to this select committee.
Yes. And the whole idea is that because it's kind of like there's this underlying hint that was mentioned before that if let's say he choose to support our current Prime Minister, then
maybe charges against him,
Yes, the charges against him will be dropped. Yeah, so I guess the way that I'm piecing everything together sounds like it's like, hey, by referring him there, it's kind of a hint that he's gonna support Prime Minister or something like that. Yeah.
So again, let me sort of like refresh, your you guys' memory. I'm not sure whether you remember, sometime last year, one Saiful came out with a media statement and also some pictures to say that there was a certain Datuk Botak that approached him and a few other Bersatu MPs to ask them to change their support to support PMX.
Right. Are you the Botak?
I can definitely deny that I was the Botak because I've not been in Parliament. I think since I
happened.
But I think what happened in this particular case was after he revealed that there was this Dato' Botak. This was in a press statement, right? In Parliament, he brought up the fact that two of the Bersatu defectors, or two of the Bersatu MPs who is now supporting PMX, they've since lost their Bersatu membership. The MP for Tanjung Karang and also the MP for Gua Musang.
Yeah.
They approached Wan Saiful, and this is what he claims, say that, hey, if you support PMX, this likely is going to be what is going to happen to you. Corruption charges against you will be dropped. And he brought it up in Parliament, hoping that there will be parliamentary immunity. But even though you cannot be prosecuted for what you say in Parliament, you can be referred to the Parliamentary Select Committee for certain things that you say, right? And this is the Parliamentary Select Committee on Privileges. Basically, it's like a committee that judges whether you've behaved properly in Parliament or not, or whether you've stepped over the line.
Yeah, so as I was reading it, they were saying that they mentioned that this is a sub judice case. They asked the speaker to actually speak about it. But I'm getting all this whole thing, but I actually don't really get the essence of the whole story.
So,
you get what I mean?
So Prime Minister Anwar himself, PMX has been referred to the Parliamentary Select Committee on Privileges before. So has Kit Siang, in the past when Najib was the Prime Minister. Usually what will happen is because the coalition that is in government has the majority, they would be able to control the outcomes.
Okay.
Right, and more often than not, the majority would decide against the opposition MP that is brought in to answer those questions and they would recommend certain actions be taken, maybe a suspension or something like that. So I think for this particular case, what the Bersatu and PN leaders are saying is that Wan Saiful's case is still in the courts.
That's right.
Right. So by asking him to testify in this select committee, you are acting in a way that is sub judice. It can prejudice the proceedings in court. The speaker decided that this was not relevant, maybe because whatever deliberations that are being undertaken within the context of this select committee on privileges, it is not broadcast live. It is not open to the public. It's only those committee members that will deliberate, right? But I think what Wan Saiful and the other Bersatu and PN MPs are doing is to basically draw public attention to this issue, to say, let the public know that this is something that's unfair that's being done against Wan Saiful, and perhaps to say that the majority now, who were in a minority before, when they were bullied, they say it's unfair. But now they are doing the bullying, we say it's unfair, right?
Yeah.
We meaning Wan Saiful and the Bersatu and PN MPs. So this saga will be an ongoing one. Just want to relate this particular issue to another topic that I think is of interest, which is two things. One is the bringing up again of this organization called Muafakat Nasional. So this Muafakat Nasional, again drawing you behind the curtain, it was an initiative that was started and spearheaded by none other than Muhammad Hassan, who is now the Deputy President of UMNO and also the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was doing this after 2018, and he wanted to use this Muafakat narrative and this sort of entity to bring together PAS and UMNO, because both of them were in the opposition at that time, right? To draw them closer together. Of course, when Sheraton move happened, once Bersatu came in, then the Muafakat Nasional narrative became less important. Right now, it's been revived again. None other than the former MP for Tanjung Karang and former UMNO Selangor State Chief, Datuk Sri Noor Omar. He has been appointed as Deputy President of Muafakat Nasional. The President is none other than Anwar Musa, also another previous UMNO strongman and previous Minister and MP for Ketere in Kelantan. So, this kind of revival, right, definitely, would draw the attention of the politicians within UMNO especially, because this is seen as a move to try to undermine UMNO. It's seen as a move to perhaps prepare a platform in the form of Muafakat to attract UMNO people who may be dissatisfied with the leadership of Zahid Hamidi. And that is why, once this announcement was made about Noor Omar, one of the first people to respond is none other than Datuk Sri Nur Jazlan, who is seen as sort of very close with the UMNO president, Zahid Hamidi. He basically criticized Anwar Musa, say that don't try to use this to weaken UMNO, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is the kind of internal politics or political maneuvers between political parties. Right.
And how is this related to Wan Saiful?
Okay, so this is the larger picture of political gamesmanship, right? Which is the attempt by those in PH, but specifically those in PKR, to want to weaken Bersatu. So the case against Wan Saiful, the case against Muhyiddin, some of the other cases, it is with the intention of wanting to weaken the standing and the support of Bersatu, trying to make Bersatu look fragmented. People are leaving the party.
It's kind of like putting a wedge in between the PN group lah.
Yes, correct. And this is also related to this suggestion or this red herring that was thrown out, none other than the communications minister, Fahmi Fadil, right? When he said that, actually, some leaders in PAS are talking to the unity government. He never said what's the content. He said, just talking about different development projects and things like that. And then people started to use that as a basis to say, actually, PAS is thinking about joining the federal government.
Right.
So all this is, side war in politics, right? So you have PKR trying to draw a wedge between PAS and Bersatu, right? To say that maybe PAS wants to talk to us to see whether we can
Yes.
have greater cooperation. Bersatu, you guys are sort of like not so stable partners.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course PAS came out to deny it, right?
Right.
So, and then at the same time you have this Muafakat, right? That's
Right.
trying to undermine UMNO.
Right.
Right? So all these are sort of like games that
It's got
politicians
like
are
throwing
playing.
bait everywhere
Yes.
to see whether who bites.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
wow.
these have actual consequences because they have the potential of undermining, the institution of political parties in Malaysia.
Right. Yeah. So then the thing is, right, because whenever I read this kind of news, I don't really see where is it going. It looks to me like, what are you all trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Like you all talk this, talk that, then
Yeah, it's very confusing, right?
When the news report also is very actually what's the point, you know?
Yes.
So I don't really get it.
Yeah. So that's why I'm drawing you behind the curtain.
Correct. So like as this podcast is, and the point of this is that when it comes to the policy level, and I guess the question that we are always trying to raise up to the public is, why does this affect us? Why should we care while we are not in politics, right?
Yes.
Like I'm definitely much more concerned about the business side of things and how politics affect business. But in this case here, can you help us to understand it better, right? Why should the man in the street care about these kind of things?
So I will relate it to Sheraton move, right? Because I think Sheraton move was a watershed in Malaysian politics, whereby people saw that, you could just change parties and then destabilize and even overthrow and change the government, right? And that's because these kinds of moves happen because of the weaknesses of the political parties as an institution, right? So the anti-hopping law was supposed to address that issue, and I think to a certain degree it has, but we wait for the speaker's decision on what's going to happen to the 6 Bersatu MPs. That will be another podcast. Very, very controversial decision, I'm sure, either way. So when we have these kinds of moves that's done by all sides to try to weaken and undermine political parties in ways that the rakyat probably are not interested in your games, right? They just want to make sure that the government comes out with policies that can improve their livelihood, right?
That's right.
But when these kinds of things becomes par for the course, right, then it weakens political parties. It weakens the basis of political competition, right? And then when you go to the polls, you're not really quite sure who the hell you're voting for, right? In terms of whether this person is going to be loyal to that party, whether this party is going to splinter and then
That's right.
create a lot of havoc and uncertainty.
That's right.
Which is why I think in a context where in Malaysia you have a party like PAS, a party like DAP, much more stronger and well-established parties, and also to a lesser extent PKR. They've been around for 25 years now, recently celebrated. So, when you have these kinds of stronger and more institutionalized parties, right, then you shouldn't have these kinds of moves to try to, undermine coalitions, undermine parties to go and take this guy to be your friend,
Right.
that guy, But I don't think we're at that stage yet.
Right.
Yeah, I think that there will still be a lot of maneuvering, especially as we approach the state elections in Sabah, later on the state elections in Sarawak, and then of course the big one, which is the 16th January election.
So I was wondering, right, based on what you've just mentioned just now, right, does it also show that there's kind of like a little bit of a flaw in the anti-hopping law, because it kind of comes down to individual, right? But it doesn't really address the question, if let's say this move happens, right, and truly say PAS decided to not work with Bersatu and they decided to work with UMNO, then what does it mean? Then as a voter, when I voted for, maybe when I voted for PAS, actually what I really wanted was to vote for PN.
Yep. So
not PAS.
That question is a bit of a separate question, although relevant, because it calls into question whether the voters are looking for a pre-election electoral pact or a post-election electoral agreement. Right. For this case, for the unity government, it is a post-election pact.
That's right.
Right, with PH coming together with UMNO and then BN/UMNO and then the parties from Sabah and Sarawak coming in. Right, so if let's say in the next general election, PAS decides to break away from Bersatu, let's say, break away and not have PN, and then decide to work with, for the sake of argument, work with UMNO, right? Together, they allocate seats and whatnot, and then, it will be, Bersatu will be left in the lurch. They will be PN, but not having PAS support, right? And, PH is still PH, right? So then the lines are much clearer, because you are going into the elections knowing who is working with whom.
Right.
But if let's say in the next election, PAS is still together with Bersatu, right? Contesting as PN, right? And then you have PH, and then BN will make their own decision. Let's say they decide to remain on their own as Barisan Nasional, right? And then after the election, for the sake of argument, let's say UMNO gets wiped out or almost wiped out. And then we have Bersatu and PAS. And then PAS decides to work with PH. Will the PAS voters feel betrayed or not?
Yeah, correct.
I would think that they would feel betrayed.
Yeah.
Correct? I think these are the kind of things that we need to have better clarity on. Right? And, if we have a better understanding that whoever's in power will not undermine the integrity of the opposition parties, that would give the political system and the party system much more stability in Malaysia.
I think if like everyone start acting in a way where it's more like we be fair, there are certain lines we don't cross, then there won't be so many low blows.
Yeah, we'll be right back after this with a couple of young people who are going to talk about their participation in the Olympiad. Not the Olympic Games, but the Olympiad. Be right back. Hey guys, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast. The final segment for today, we have two special guests. Their names are Quincy and Evan. Ladies first, Quincy, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, I'm Quincy. I've just recently finished my A-levels at Help Academy. I'm an aspiring economics major and looking forward to a career in economics and policy.
Hello everyone, my name is Evan. I am an A-level student at CIMB College and I look to aspire and pursue my penchant in economics, politics and public policy.
I understand that both of you have been selected for something called the Olympiad. This is not the Olympic Games, for those of you who may not be familiar. These are sort of like more, I would say, academic competitions. And you guys have been selected for the Economics Olympiad. So I think for some of you who may be a bit more familiar, the Mathematics Olympiad is one that's quite famous. It's probably the most longest established Olympiad. And then you have some in other sciences, for example, physics, chemistry, biology. And now, based on what you guys have told me, there's also other Olympiads, including economics, the Economics Olympiad that started in 2018. So maybe you can let us know, how did you guys sort of like get interested in wanting to even apply for this Economics Olympiad? Maybe Quincy, you'd like to start?
I've been involved in Olympiad since primary school. I used to do math, science, earth science and astronomy Olympiads since forever. And I'm also currently a director in a student organization called the Malaysian Alumni Association of International Science Olympiads. I know it's a bit long. Short form, we call ourselves AMISO, AMISO. And our main goals are igniting scientific opportunity and raising Olympiad interests among Malaysian youth. So when I decided to pursue economics during my A-levels for my further studies, it seemed like the right next step to go and find the Economics Olympiad. And AMISO introduced that opportunity to me. I met IEO alumni from previous years, and from there, the ball just kept rolling and I managed to get on the team.
So I've always been interested in economics primarily because I wanted to understand how the world functioned. So business, finance, politics, public policy. I think at the heart all of it was economics. So I really was super interested in that, and I always wanted, being a competition guy myself, if there was some sort of prestigious economics competition that could be done in Malaysia. While there are other competitions like, say, the Malaysian Public Policy Competition, there wasn't really any economics Olympiad yet. So until like recently as well. So that's why I decided to join as well. And being part of other student organizations such as the Association for Malaysian Economics Undergraduates, AMU, as well as ICMS, the International Council of Malaysian Scholars. Leadership positions is one thing for university applications, but extracurricular activities in the subject of your choice was something that I really wanted to do, and this Olympiad provided me exactly the opportunity.
So how did you guys sort of like get selected? Was there some sort of test or something like that?
There are 3 stages to get selected for the International Economics Olympiad, or IEO as we'll call from here. So there's the Kijang Economics Competition, which takes place at the school level. There's usually about 1,000 to 2,000 participants nationwide, secondary and lower secondary. Then for that, the top 10% will get chosen for the Malaysian Economics Olympiad, which is like nationwide, national level type competition. So only the top 10% get selected. They're basically medalists. For there, we'll do some economics questions, so multiple choice, a few essays in like a bunch of topics within and outside our syllabus especially. So after that, the best students, so typically about 15 or 20 students, will get a selection camp. That way they'll sort of assess us better to choose the top 5 for the team. So for this year, one of our selection tests was making a business case presentation relating to commercial banking. How would we, as say, risk analysts, improve the profitability of a small banking institution. So we had to make role play in a way and make our whole presentation about it, explain our stance and all that in under 24 hours. So yeah, it was really quite intense. It's a really rigorous process, the whole thing. So after that, me, Quincy, and 3 of our other teammates were chosen as the top 5 nationwide to represent Malaysia at the IEO this year.
Which organization is the one that's conducting these tests?
So currently, the organization is Ardent Educational Consultants. They also handle quite a few selection processes for other Olympiads like linguistics, earth science, and astronomy. They handle the selection process all the way from the initial Kijang Economics that Evan mentioned earlier. And the Ardent also helps us liaise with the IEO committee in Hong Kong. The IEO will be held in Hong Kong this year, by the way. And they also help us handle the logistics and the selection process, and also with our training.
If I'm not mistaken, Ardent, one of the main principles behind it is a gentleman by the name of Suhaimi. Is that right? Yeah. So in full disclosure, I've known Suhaimi for quite some time because him and another close friend of mine, his name is Professor Ong Shen Jin. They were the first pioneer group of Math Olympiad participants. But yeah, I mean, for you guys, can you maybe just let us know what is it that you guys learned during the preparation process, and what did you guys do to prepare for the exams that you guys took?
When we joined, we were quite, I would say, avid like economics people. We liked watching a lot of YouTube videos about economics, like business explainer videos, stuff about economic phenomena, news that's going on, having this sort of general awareness and such. So when we joined the competition, like we kind of had to take like that knowledge and sort of like leverage it in like a more technical aspect. So we did a lot of stuff within our syllabus, and we even went into, say, undergraduate economics textbooks to like really prepare ahead. And of course did a lot of past paper questions, as quite standard for most of students here as well. So that was sort of like our main preparation. So a lot of books, a lot of reading, especially stuff within economics, and just sort of get immersed throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, so can I ask, do you guys read The Economist?
Yes. I mean,
does it help prepare you guys for these kinds of exams and tests?
Sometimes in the IEO, we have one of the rounds. It's called an economics round. It's your typical Olympiad exam style questions. You have MCQ, you have open-ended essay questions. And oftentimes the MCQ questions will involve some recent piece of world news. So having that kind of general knowledge of the current affairs happening in the world definitely helps you in answering those kinds of questions.
Peter, and you also have been listening to the Economist podcast and things of that nature. Has that helped you in sort of like the global sort of like perspective?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, but somehow the way they talk sound like they are plucked out from the podcast lah.
We have different ways of communicating,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I was like, I'm like admiring, right? Like, wow, it's like I'm listening to an Economist podcast,
All right, so well, that's why they are in the Economics Olympiad, and we are not. We're just podcasters, right? Right. Now you guys have been selected, the both of you and 3 others. You're going to Hong Kong for this International Economics Olympiad. How are you being supported? And there are 2 components of this. How are you being supported in terms of preparation? Doing additional tests and exams and business case preparation. That's one. And then the second one would be, how are you guys being supported financially?
So preparation wise, other than us studying by ourselves, we also have received some support like training sessions, individual and team training sessions like for the team that's selected. So things sort of covering more like abstract economic ideas. For example, reverse game theory, mechanism design, its sort of applications in there, applying in real life context, going through some of our the papers that we did during the Mayo selection rounds, sort of seeing what we can do better in that round. And I think most importantly, the business case presentation aspect. So like how we conduct ourselves, what are some things that we can do. Like our coach, especially, I think he's really supportive of us. The one really interesting thing he said was that he doesn't, when he's conducting these sessions, he says that he doesn't approach himself as a teacher, because he admits that in many ways some of us students will know things that he doesn't. So that can that's a really good way to do that. So we do have received some training from Ardent, the organization, especially for in preparation.
The mentor or your coach, is it okay if you tell us his name and also what he's doing now currently?
His name is Mr. Hamidi. He is the Chief Risk Officer at Bank Muafakat, and he's also an adjunct professor of economics at Islamic University Malaysia.
Yeah, and he's also one of the steering committee members at the IEO committee as well. So he's been involved from like the start, you could say.
Yeah, so on the funding side, Quincy.
In terms of funding, we are expected to be self-funded. However, I think some of us, our fellow team members, have received some support from their respective institutions in terms of funding. However, it definitely isn't enough to cover the cost of any one of us attending. So right now, we are currently seeking sponsorship from interested corporations and organizations. If you want to help support us and help us bring pride to the Jalur Gemilang on the world stage, do contact us. Our official Instagram is at ieo.teammalaysia. So if you want to consider supporting or donating to our upcoming crowdfunding campaign, do reach out to us.
We'll post the Instagram link in our show notes, in our YouTube channel, and also some of the additional details that they will provide to us that we will share. And I think maybe on a more personal personal pitch, so to speak, on behalf of you guys, I haven't participated in any Olympiad before, but I know of many of my peers in Singapore who have participated in physics, chemistry, math Olympiads. And these guys are people whom I admire a lot. They were definitely the smartest people I know in those respective fields. And some of you may be thinking, why do we want to support something that is so, quote unquote, so elitist? I think it is important for us to support such initiatives for a few reasons. Firstly, we're not only supporting the competitors, but we're also supporting the larger ecosystem, whereby you've heard Evan say more than 1,000 students are sitting for the tests and applying every year. So this is one way in which we can build a much more robust intellectual ecosystem in Malaysia. And even in the Madani economic framework, the Prime Minister talks about raising the floor and raising the bar and raising the ceiling. So this is our effort to try to raise the ceiling for a small but important group of young people. And I think the second reason why this is important is because if, let's say, we want to be the best of the best, we want to compete at the international level, and also to be able to put ourselves on par with some of our neighbors, whether it's Singapore, Vietnam, these countries that are very good in some of these Olympiads and receive good government support. We should support our youngsters, our competitors and participants in these kinds of competitions as well, as part and parcel of wanting to really develop world-class thinkers in this field. So imagine a case where you guys are always complaining about, we need to have better management of our currency reserves. We need to have a better system of making sure that our ringgit value is appreciated and stable, right? These are the young people that maybe one day will end up working in Bank Negara and be part of that ecosystem that can help, with regards to public policies, economic policies, to strengthen the core competencies of some of our public institutions. And this is sort of like my personal pitch to you guys. I'll be also supporting them in my personal capacity, and I hope that you guys can also help out in this way. And we'll be putting the details in the show notes in this program.
That's right.
Any last thoughts that you want to add, Peter?
Yeah, so just a few things, right, that I think in the Malaysia ecosystem when it comes to education, very often we celebrate a lot of athletes, everything all, right? But the truth is, if you actually look at Olympiads, actually I do have quite a few friends who are from Olympiads. Yeah, so back then, my school, I think one of the guys won, and then his picture was there for a very, 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 very long time. But the point I want to make is that I was just trying to study the difference between the Vietnam education and Malaysia, because Vietnam does very well in education. And one of the things that they highlighted was the fact that the community make education achievement something that the whole community to be proud of.
The whole country.
Yes, the whole country is proud of. So like, for example, when they scored well in PISA, right, they have this shirt that says, I participate in PISA, right? But I think in Malaysia, we still don't have that culture yet. Yeah, it's still kind of like, so Olympiad, congratulations. The only time people are going to talk to you guys, right, is after you win. Before that, no one cares, right? Yeah. So I think that's a very sad thing, because if we can make academics part of a celebratory culture, something that people can be proud of, just like watching football or whatnot, I think it can gain a lot more interest amongst people, and therefore removing the idea of like it being just an elitism kind of thing, right? Yeah, because currently right now it's the information is still so limited, and there's a reason why it sounds elitism, because it's not circulated that well. There's not much of coverage about it. There's not much of encouragement about it. Yeah, so therefore it becomes like only the privileged few, not say privileged few, but people really, really, really interested will make the extra effort to go and find out, right? Like you guys, like probably half the things that you tell me about is like, oh yeah, got such thing, huh? I also didn't know, right? I think that this is something that can be promoted, and for those of you out there, whether corporations, I know a lot of our sponsors are banks and so on, you need people like this, right? And I think government should also pay more attention to it, and political party especially, right? Because yeah, I think these are things I really look forward to. So I hope that when you guys win, and even win or not win or whatever not, just make Malaysia proud and contribute to the nation.
So you know what to do. Ping us up, message us, and get in touch with these guys. IEO Malaysia.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.